Welcome back, everybody. If you're watching the speaker's race, you are essentially watching legislative history play out before your eyes, and I love it. If you are a spectator of politics, what a time to be alive. And if the GOP doesn't change course at some point, they're going to be in the House chamber voting for Speaker for a fourth consecutive day. And our next guest has been very consistent in his messaging. Joining right now is the Representative Austin Scott from the Peach State to give us his perspective. Congressman, Happy New Year. Great to see you. Bring us up to speed, if you could, sir.
Hey, Amanda and John. I was watching my good friend Warren go right before, and I'll tell you, he and I see it very much the same way. Kevin McCarthy's been here a long time. He's taken some heat for some things that were done under his predecessors in Boehner and Ryan. And I will tell you, I was here when we had the majority to actually get a lot done. And I watched as Boehner would go to Pelosi and cut a deal with Pelosi where the majority of the Democrats voted for something, the majority of the Republicans voted against it, but ultimately he passed things with more Democrat votes than Republican votes. We've changed the rules in the conference. It now requires 50% of the conference, the Republicans, to say yes to a spending bill, to say yes to a debt limit increase. And so when I listen to other members who I personally get along with very well say, McCarthy will have a straitjacket on, we put the rules in place so that the Senate cannot take advantage of the American citizens the way they've been doing for years. And it hasn't mattered if it was a Republican in charge of the Senate or a Democrat in charge of the Senate since I've been here. They pass a big piece of legislation, just like they did the last week of last year. They send it over to the House, and they give the House a day to read a 4,000-page piece of legislation that spends $1.7 trillion. And then they leave home for Christmas. We have the rules set where they cannot do that anymore. And so that's the goal. It doesn't matter who the person that is the speaker is. What matters the most is policy. Now, Kevin McCarthy has earned the right to be the speaker. He's carried us to the majority. And I feel very good about his ability to lead the conference. And I feel good about the rules that we put in place in protecting the American citizens from us continuing to spend $1 trillion more than we have to spend, regardless of who's in charge of the House or the Senate.
Yeah, those are great points. Congressman, I want to ask, I know there was a lot of talk at the beginning, there'll be retribution, hell to pay for these 20. I get the sense as this deal gets towards the end that some of that talk is going to fritter away and that the caucus is going to come together. There won't be that sort of punishment. Should there be an amnesty moment now that the caucus is coming around, a potential deal?
Yeah, look, I'm short-sightedness, I certainly feel that way, that if you've got 20 that have effectively functioned as a union, that they shouldn't be rewarded for that. The fact of the matter is we need to function like a football team. We need to put the right people in the right places. And so if one of those 20 is the right person for the appropriations process, then that's where they should be. And I'll give you a perfect example of that. Andrew Clyde from Georgia. Yep. I very much want to see him on the Appropriations Committee. I want to see him on the Justice Subcommittee, where when the ATF does something unconstitutional, they've got to come to Andrew Clyde and ask him for money for their budget. And so I think the only way we as Republicans can be successful is if we put the best people in the best spots on the right committees for them. Now, if that's going to happen, John, I think there's a limited amount of time that we have to kind of get this done, get the rules set, and move forward. Now, where I do think you have the potential for retribution is if you have this 20 that has effectively functioned as a union on the far right. And I want to remind you, Jim Jordan, guys like Warren, myself, we've got pretty conservative scorecards. Sure do. And many of the most conservative members of the House are looking at the tactics of what's being done by the 20 and see them as very dangerous, because if they push it too far, you have the potential of having 20 of our moderates or liberals actually team with Democrats to pass their legislation. And I'll give you a good example. Someone wanted a rule adopted that said, well, if any 20 members supported something, then there would be a vote on that particular piece of legislation on the floor. Well, that sounds okay, except for if you've got a little bit of political experience, you recognize there are 212 Democrats that are going to vote in block. Right. And there are always a few Republicans that will vote with them. We had 16 Republicans that voted to make Puerto Rico a state. We had Republicans vote to make that omnibus bill the law. So So we're not in a position where a rule like that actually helps conservatives. It would only be liberal things like red flag laws that would get passed if you allowed any 20 Republicans to put a piece of legislation on the floor, because the 212 Democrats are chomping at the bit
Yep.
To see that done.
Yeah, that's really smart wisdom. You're right.
Yeah, and Congressman, I know that a lot of people out there, people who aren't there seeing the sausage being made firsthand. For you, let me just say, you've got to be mentally exhausted after these last few days. For me, I actually love it. I think it's fun to watch, but I know you don't feel the same way. But for a lot of folks, they feel like this should have...
Go ahead, sir.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say,
This-
prior to January 3rd, folks feel like this probably should have been buttoned up, but I know you all have been very busy setting the agenda, setting priorities. Can you shed some light on that?
Yeah, I expected it to take a while. We had a very slim margin. We knew that there were going to be some further questions about the rules. I expected it to take a while, and I'll tell you, it's more important to get to the right place. And when I say the right place, that means Kevin McCarthy is Speaker, and it means having rules in place that doesn't allow the Senate to jam through big spending bills the way they did with the omnibus without members of the House even having a chance to read it. And it protects conservatives from having things come to the floor where a fraction of the Democrats, a fraction of the Republicans vote with the Democrats to pass that legislation, send it to a Democrat Senate where Schumer's in charge, and then to the president's desk to become the law of the land. So I'm comfortable getting to the right spot where that's Kevin McCarthy as the Speaker of the House, with the right set of rules in place that protect the American citizens and their constitutional rights, regardless of who the Speaker of the House is. And then let's get to work on exposing what everybody in America knows Joe Biden has been doing with ignoring his duty to protect us from what's happening at the border. Let's take a look at what he actually did with the strategic petroleum reserves and where our oil reserves went. Let's look at energy independence and how we can actually fix inflation or help with inflation anyway, a large part of which is because of what he did with the price of energy in this country. There are things that we can do as a Republican Party to help the American citizens, and that comes simply by showing the American citizens what the truth is in a manner that the major news sources can't ignore.
So true.
Congressman Scott, thank you so much for your update. I know that it's a slim time for you, slim schedule, so we appreciate it, and we'll have you back on very, very soon. Better him than me, because I would be subsisting on Red Bull and Ritz crackers, so I'm glad that it's not me up there on Capitol Hill. It's got to be exhausting. We'll have more after these commercial breaks.